Hello everyone, welcome back to Allcarnews, and you join me here in the 2024 Nissan Sentra SR that I have been driving over this past week. And I actually want to talk about an interesting aspect of this vehicle in this particular video, and that is the CVT, the famed, infamous, continuously variable transmission. In this particular case though, it's all new, and currently it's the only vehicle I believe you can get with it right now. It's called the new JATCO CVT-XS. We're gonna dive into a lot of stuff here, so stay tuned. But this new CVT honestly is quite good, and it's honestly something you may want to consider versus the pre-facelifted Sentra, because this is the only one that has it. The pre-facelift Sentra does not have this particular CVT. This is new. It started production last October in 2023, and actually quite like it. It's meant to improve fuel efficiency, safety of the vehicle, and for pedestrian crash safety, as well as improving drivability. And that drivability aspect, as a driver, you definitely notice a difference here with this upgraded new JATCO XS CVT. So let's dive in with all these interesting details. This is going to be a very unique conversation that I don't think enough people are having. Okay, everyone, let's start up our Nissan Sentra here. We have the 2024 Nissan Sentra, and this is an important thing to know because this particular facelifted version of the Sentra is the one with this new continuously variable transmission. So on a face value, what are we looking at here? Under the hood, of course, we have that 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder making around 149 horsepower, similar as torque numbers as well. And then we have, of course, our gear selector here for this CVT. This visually doesn't look much different than the other Nissans, but underneath this tunnel here is, and underneath this whole dash and in there is that upgraded new continuously variable transmission. So that's really that big new aspect here. Over here, of course, we have park, reverse, neutral, drive, and a low range setting for this continuously variable transmission. And we also have a sport button here, which I'm not too big of a fan of the placement. I wish it was placed right next to this eco button over here, which also helps improve efficiency. There's a blank button here. I think that would have been perfect for a sport mode, but otherwise you do still have it. So it's really just going to change the software tuning of this CVT to kind of give you a little more revs, a little more responsiveness. But what they've actually done on this new continuously variable transmission, aka the XS, by the way, love these cameras Nissan on the Sentra, really helpful. It's really just make it overall better. They literally listened to customers, they listened to complaints, they also had to listen to the new fuel economy requirements they had to meet as well, and made adjustments accordingly. And I think they've done a great job at doing so. You know, continuously variable transmissions have been around for nearly 100 years at this point. They've come out, I think, around in like the 1950s. They've been around for a very long time. And JATCO, Nissan's main supplier, is one of the leading, if not the leading, continuously variable transmission manufacturer and supplier in the world. And this new particular gearbox was heavily worked on within Mexico, their Mexico production facility, and it's also built in Mexico with this new 2024 facelifted Sentra. So that's really interesting how they've really worked in line with this vehicle to kind of optimize it as much as they possibly can. And I think they've done a great job. Why so? Well, let's touch on, I think, the first aspect of this new XS transmission here, and that would be in terms of fuel economy. So what the engineers at JATCO have done is they've decreased the size of the mechanical oil pump on this continuously variable transmission here. And what that is going to do actually is kind of reduce a lot of additional friction and stuff going on in that continuously variable transmission to actually improve fuel economy, they found in their findings. So that's one of the main aspects here, I think, in terms of fuel economy. And I think that works well on this Sentra. We've been getting pretty impressive numbers here. And it also has auto stop start enabled now for 2024. The pre-facelift Sentras did not actually have auto stop start. That's not necessarily something to do with this CVT. That's more of with engine tuning and stuff, but it does work directly with the CVT to give you that really smooth and efficient auto stop start experience. I really don't have any issues with it at all, which I think is quite nice. And fuel economy has honestly been quite good. This is an average screen, but we've been seeing 36 miles per gallon on the highway on average, and people have definitely been able to squeeze into the 42. And this is with the 18-inch wheels in this Sentra SR. If you have the smaller inch 16, 17-inch wheels, you're actually going to get a little bit better fuel economy as well. So that's also quite impressive of a feat. Now, another area where this continuously variable transmission has been improved is actually an interesting one: crash safety. So what the engineers did when developing this transmission on this next generation CVT that they plan to both have on the market for the foreseeable future, but also to improve reliability, safety, and all these key points that they really want to strengthen here is they reworked these control valves to make them, I believe, now vertical. And what this has done is actually shorten the height of the CVT. So it's now a shorter unit overall. And what this is doing is both helping to improve crash safety standards. So I believe in pedestrian crash safety standards, I think it just shortens that overall space of like larger components under the hood to reduce any kind of impact on a pedestrian if you hit them, which I think is a pretty cool feature as well. But it also has the effect of increasing the max torque intake and I guess output of this continuously variable transmission to, I believe, just around 200 pound-feet of torque, or around 280 newton meters of torque. So that's another improvement we have on this latest generation of the CVT in this 2024 Sentra. And then the next big piece to this next generation CVT is drivability. And we're about to enter onto the highway here, and I'll just give you a little bit of a taste of this newer style of drivability access by putting into the sport programming and listen to it accelerate onto the highway, and pay attention to the revs and watch what they do. And we're coasting down this hill right now a little bit. I'll tell you guys when I step on it to kind of get a sense of how this thing operates now. So there we go. It shifted and acted, in this case, like an automatic transmission, not a CVT transmission, an automatic transmission. Now, all of this is in response to a lot of customer feedback around the continuously variable transmission. I personally have lived with these transmissions for a very long time in Subaru products for probably the past 15 years now, and those early ones definitely had that rubber banding effect. You would kind of put your foot on the gas like this, and it would just sit at like 5,000–6,000 RPM and just keep sitting there till the car accelerates up to speed. People really don't like that. Another issue with the CVT is that it had this rubber banding effect where it kind of just like, there's like a big disconnect from when you were inputting throttle with your foot on the gas pedal and what was happening with the transmission and that sensation of speed. It was just all a little bit wishy-washy. It almost felt like a direct drive in a sense, where you're just kind of like sitting in here and letting the engines go, 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 and go it up until it eventually gets to speed, which to me, both didn't sound audibly very well, but as a driver in a driving experience, it doesn't feel very communicative. And at the end of the day, yeah, that's not really what CVTs are meant to be doing. They're meant to kind of help improve fuel efficiency and just, you know, keep that engine in that max, the optimal RPM band to get the power up to what you need to do. It's never really was meant to be a performance tuned focused transmission, but what they've done here is kind of moved towards that direction. We've already seen Subaru do this with their new Subaru performance transmission on their Xtronic CVT, and honestly, after driving that for a week last year, I actually was quite impressed with that. It had paddle shifters, those operated very quickly. There was a few different transmission settings for that. Very responsive. It almost felt like a dual clutch in a sense. I think it worked well with that engine, though, you know, you want a manual and a WRX. In this case, you don't even have paddle shifters, even in the Sentra SR, or any way to kind of shift the CVT manually other than putting it into that low range setting there. But like I said, what has been improved is that drivability aspect, and they've done this by adding a new multi-plate clutch system as well as a 3-way solenoid. And what this is doing is both helping to work with those simulated shifts that we see when we kind of floor it now in this next generation CVT. It kind of mimics those shifts as if it's going through gears, but it's really just changing that that band ratio of that band within the continuously variable transmission unit there. But what this new setup is also doing is helping to improve that directness, that direct sense of acceleration and throttle input you're getting when you're driving the vehicle. So for example, some older CVTs, when you kind of just like lightly press the throttle, it would just shoot up, stay at the high rev range, and kind of just sit there, and you would have this weird rubber banding effect where the revs would just drop slowly. You can kind of hear the engine rev down. This doesn't do that anymore. As you can see now, accelerate a little bit, and it quickly just drops right back down to a good idle speed, wherever it is idle speed's appropriate at for the speed you're at. That's just more like a normal transmission does. So that's one little thing that I've noticed just driving this around that makes a big difference. Now, popping it into that sport tuning, you're gonna see it's gonna bump up your revs now by almost like 1,500 to 1,000 to really get that power band a little bit sooner for you. And you can see there, it did that simulated gear shift once again. Now, we're going uphill. It's a small engine, it makes 149 horsepower at the end of the day, so it's gonna need to rev itself out to kind of get that power to the ground. But in normal cases, you're gonna see this just like kind of shift through gears. And honestly, at slower speeds, it does it so quickly, you almost feel like you're in like a dual clutch style transmission. It's really cool how they've kind of done this tuning to make these improvements going down the road. So I really like that as well. And another big thing with this is that sense of acceleration. And it took me a little bit of time to kind of understand what they were meaning by that until I was driving it a lot in all sorts of city, highway conditions. And that's when I was like, oh, wait a second. It does just feel like a regular transmission, in the sense of when you're kind of accelerating up to speed and letting off, not only is that revs dropping back to a normal level quickly, you don't feel like the car is still accelerating ahead of you, even when you remove your foot from the gas pedal. I've noticed that in some CVTs where you let your foot off the gas, the car kind of feels like it's still jolting ahead. Now it feels like I'm in control now. When I get my foot off the gas, the car is gonna just, you know, coast and stop accelerating, or kind of having that weird effect to it, which I quite like as well. So they've done a lot of tuning, like I've said here, to really get this a more comfortable feeling experience for a lot of people, while also improving the reliability, longevity, and fuel economy as well with this new continuously variable transmission. So they've done a lot of great things here that I actually do notice as a driver behind the wheel, and something you probably would notice if you were switching from a pre-facelifted Sentra of this current generation. Now, what happens when you pop it into the eco mode? Well, essentially this is a powertrain eco mode, so the revs are going to be as low as I possibly can go with the CVT, and you know, the throttle inputs are going to be reduced. So the same input you would have in that sports setting, it's not going to give you as much power. It's going to kind of reduce that a little bit to kind of help you get better fuel economy, keep you in that lower power area, so you're not just flooring it out all the place and, you know, wasting fuel. But popping off, you can already notice a difference. My foot was at the same position, and you notice a little change in the revs there in between eco and just this regular driving mode. So there is definitely a difference there, and that's not necessarily anything new. A lot of automakers have been doing something like that for a while now. It's just nice to see that they have that flexibility here on the Sentra still. And you know, I'm making this video because I'm following up on an older video I did with a previous Subaru we used to have in the family that had a continuously variable transmission with nearly over around 100,000 miles, and we never had any issues with the CVT. Now, I'm obviously not living under a rock. I know that a lot of you guys have had issues, complaints, and whatnot about these JATCO CVTs in the past. And I have to say, I really don't think you should expect anything of that kind of issue in this newer generation system of CVTs. Yes, Nissan is moving a lot of vehicles over to a newer 9-speed automatic, which I think is a great move. I would wish they would do that to all of their vehicles. But you know, looking at this class of vehicle that the Sentra competes in, there are a lot of them are all CVTs. So it's honestly a competitive space now for this continuously variable transmission. I'm glad to see that JATCO has now made these improvements to both stay competitive and kind of stay ahead of the curve with these future-proofed new technologies they've put in here. You know, it's interesting to see how this is going to play out down the road. Definitely, I think this works well with this newer generation Sentra. This newer generation Sentra, generally, you know, as a commuter car, I think it's a pretty unique little experience. It handles quite well, has a multi-link independent rear suspension, a little bit different than some competitors which use that torsion beam bar across the back, which is a little bit of more of a cost-saving measure there. But overall, this whole powertrain package, I think, is a really solid improvement for the 2024 facelift Sentra. And like I said, if you're going from a previous Sentra, drive this, go to your Nissan dealer, and you will notice the difference, especially even in just driving experience with this transmission change. It's a noticeable one. Anyways, guys, thank you for joining me on this latest video over at Allcarnews. Feel free to drop down any questions or comments. If you feel like I got something wrong or want to fully explain something more, definitely let me know that in the comment section. And as always, stay tuned for more coming soon. Cheers.